All right, welcome to all the aggressive founders, scaling executives, and system architects tuning in from India's hyper-competitive tech hubs, whether you're building in Bengaluru, Gurgaon, or anywhere in between. I am so thrilled to have you here for this explainer. Today, we're basically slapping on our turnaround coach hats and completely dismantling a massive corporate myth. I'm talking about the legend of the star individual contributor. We're going to dive deep into what is arguably the definitive playbook for scaling, Andrew S. Grove's absolute masterpiece, high output management. Get ready, because we're about to tear down your operational bottlenecks. Okay, so let's get into this rigorous, engineering-driven blueprint for organizational scaling. Here is our exact operational agenda for today. 1. The output scaling equation. 2. Architecting the breakfast factory. 3. The managerial leverage matrix. 4. Meetings as operating tables. 5. The task-relevant maturity framework. And finally, number 6, architecting high-yield teams.
Let's kick things off with Section 1, the output scaling equation, and honestly, the brutal truth of it all. Look, there is a serious diagnostic friction plaguing fast-paced Indian startups right now. You know the drill. We take our absolutely phenomenal individual contributor, like your top-tier coder or your rockstar sales closer, and we reward them with a promotion. But here's the catch. Doing the work and managing the work, those are two entirely different biological skill sets. What happens is you lose your absolute best producer, and in return, you get a low-output, constantly firefighting, deeply frustrated manager. This brings us to the legend himself, Andy Grove, the man who quite literally mentored giants like Steve Jobs and Mark Zuckerberg, forces a complete paradigm shift with this one quote. A manager's output is the output of the organization units under his supervision or influence. Think about that. If you are grinding out 14-hour days, drowning in emails, and constantly putting out fires, but your team's output is zero, well, as a manager, you are failing.
So, the crucial point is right here in this equation. Managerial output equals the sum of managerial activity multiplied by managerial leverage. This mathematical formula literally proves that your personal output as a manager is strictly zero. Crazy, right? Your true output is purely the combined results of the teams you supervise and influence. Management is not some kind of mystical art. It is an engineering system.
All right, moving right along to Section 2, architecting the breakfast factory. These are your core production principles. To get a massive 10x multiplier on our output, we have to systematically reframe chaotic startup workflows into a highly tuned manufacturing pipeline. And Grove uses this brilliant analogy, running a restaurant where a customer orders a 3-minute boiled egg, toast, and coffee. They all need to arrive hot, exactly at the same time, and at minimum cost. So step 1 is identifying the limiting step. In this case, it's the 3-minute boiled egg, simply because it takes the longest. You literally cannot speed up a boiling egg. So you absolutely must construct the entire workflow, making the toast and the coffee, around that critical 3-minute window. In your startup, this limiting step might be a delayed legal clearance or, say, a really complex back-end database setup. Find it and build your entire pipeline around it.
And doing this brilliantly illustrates the need for strict, data-driven telemetry. You just cannot run a factory, or a modern tech startup for that matter, flying completely blind. Every single morning, you need a visual dashboard. You need your sales forecast for incoming demand. You need your raw material inventory for resource availability, equipment condition covering your server health, manpower capacity, and quality indicators like your clean parsing error rates. Without this specific scorecard, you are honestly just guessing.
Now, let's talk about catching garbage early through inline inspection. Going back to the egg, if it's rotten, you throw it out before boiling it, right? It costs you maybe 5 rupees. Applying this to our own ecosystem, if you automate a 5% GST compliance check right at the raw data ingestion stage, the fix is virtually free. But if a defect actually reaches the customer delivery stage, like if a totally botched invoice reaches your top client, you are looking at massive brand damage and heavy financial loss. You have to catch defects at the lowest possible value stage.
Which brings us to Section 3, the managerial leverage matrix. This is all about ruthless prioritization. This demands ruthless prioritization of a founder's most limited resource, which is, of course, your time. Let's audit your calendar right now. As a manager, you really only have about 8 to 10 highly effective hours a day. High-leverage activities look exactly like this, spending 1 hour training a team of 10, which then saves hundreds of hours downstream, or setting SOPs, or conducting a project pre-mortem to prevent a total disaster.
Conversely, low-leverage activities must stop immediately. Doing individual tasks yourself, endless unstructured meetings, and answering emails that a junior could easily handle. You need to deploy your energy strictly on exponential downstream results. Now, beware of negative leverage. I want you to consider the number 80. If an executive walks into a room in a terrible mood, yells at a team of 10 people without cause, and just ruins their focus for the day, well, 10 people times 8 hours equals 80 hours of team output completely destroyed in a 5-minute tantrum. Always remember, your behavior scales, for better or worse.
Systematically auditing the traditional boss against the high-output manager makes the difference painfully clear. The low-output boss is constantly busy with personal tasks and evaluates people based on just logged hours. But the high-output manager, doing things the Andy Grove way, focuses purely on leverage to multiply team output. They apply inline inspection early, and they properly diagnose performance gaps instead of just lazily blaming a bad attitude.
Okay, Section 4, Meetings as Operating Tables, a medium of work.
We really need to stop complaining about meetings. In corporate architecture, they are the exact place where managerial leverage is actually applied. Think of them as the surgeon's operating table. We categorize them into 2 buckets. First, process-oriented meetings. These are your scheduled, regular routines, like your staff meetings or one-on-ones, that maintain the baseline workflow. Then you have mission-oriented meetings, which are ad hoc, urgent problem-solving sessions for sudden emergencies. And here is the golden rule you need to memorize. If your ad hoc, emergency meetings exceed 20% of your calendar, your organizational system is fundamentally broken. Now here is the absolute secret playbook for one-on-ones. Listen closely to this. It is not your meeting, it is the employee's meeting. The subordinate sets the agenda 24 hours in advance. It should be a bi-weekly, strictly 45-minute block where you, the manager, are listening 80% of the time. Your only job here is to clear obstacles and align their performance. I promise you, this single habit will transform your retention. Let's roll right into Section 5. Task-relevant maturity, or the TRM framework. This is basically the biological formula for knowing exactly when you should micromanage and when you absolutely must step back. We define task-relevant maturity, or TRM, as an employee's specific capability, experience, and confidence for a specific operational task. Keep in mind, this has absolutely nothing to do with their age or their fancy title. For example, a 10-year vice president who's deploying a brand new AI automation tool for the very first time still has a completely low TRM for that specific task.
So, this matrix dynamically recalibrates your leadership style based on that. For low TRM, meaning a completely new task, you must be highly structured and direct. Tell them exactly what, how, and when. Highly monitor them. Now, for medium TRM, you shift gears to support and advice exchange. And for high TRM, when they are a true expert, you set the baseline metrics, hand over full autonomy, and just get out of their way. The absolute fatal error of management is micromanaging a high TRM expert until they quit in frustration, or abandoning a low TRM beginner with full delegation until the whole project crashes.
Because look, when performance inevitably drops, you need to diagnose it objectively. Work really only fails for 2 reasons. 1, a capacity issue. They literally cannot do it because they lack the skill or the resources. In that case, your job is to train them. Or 2, a motivation issue. They will not do it because they lack the drive. Then your job is to motivate them. Following Maslow's hierarchy, your ultimate goal as a high-output manager is to push your employees all the way up into the self-actualization zone, where their drive for mastery just makes them completely unstoppable. Finally, Section 6, Architecting High-Yield Teams. Here is your exact playbook. Let's bring all these systems together into a concrete, scannable blueprint. This is where the rubber meets the road for scaling your operations. So here are your immediate action steps for tomorrow morning. First, implement employee-led bi-weekly one-on-ones with strict prior agendas. Next, enforce inline quality control by automating complex calculations at the raw stage, like that 5% GST invoicing check in your billing engine, so you aren't losing massive leverage fixing back-end errors. And finally, print out your calendar. Color-code your tasks by leverage, green, yellow, and red. Then ruthlessly delegate or automate every single red, zero-leverage task. You need to reinvest those saved hours purely into training and standard setting. At the end of the day, you have to drop the personal ego. Maximizing your organization's output absolutely requires you to completely drop the individual worker mindset. Just remember this: management is not an art. It is an exacting, measurable, and highly scalable engineering science, period. So I want to leave you with one final, uncompromising question to audit your own professional life. Are you an architect of high-leverage systems, or are you honestly just an overworked individual contributor who happens to be holding a manager's title? It's time to rebuild those corporate systems. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll see you in the next one.